But White House trade advisor Peter Navarro believes that this is India's war. We know that they put 50% tariffs in India. And here is what he said, Richard, responding to the reporter.
Talks with India right now? Is there a potential for a deal to change that number?
Look, it's real easy. India can get 25% off tomorrow if it stops buying Russian oil and helping to feed the war machine.
Not sending that signal?
They're not. And look, here's the thing. I'm puzzled, okay? Because Modi's a great leader. These people this is a mature democracy with intelligent people running it. And they look us bald-faced in the eye on the tariff part and say, we don't have the highest tariffs in the world, when in fact they do. There's no dispute about that if you look at the numbers. And then they say, oh, we're not going to stop buying Russian oil. Now, what does that mean? I mean, we've talked about this, but it's worth talking to your viewers again. When India buys Russian oil at a discount, and then Indian refiners in partnership in India with Russian refiners make that and sell it at a premium to the rest of the world, right? Russia uses the money it gets to fund its war machine, kill more Ukrainians. And then the next thing that happens, of course, is Ukraine comes to us and Europe and says, give us some more money. So everybody in America loses because of what India is doing. The consumers and businesses and everything lose, and workers lose because India's high tariffs cost us jobs and factories and income and higher wages. And then the taxpayers lose because we got to fund Modi's war, okay? The road to peace runs at least partly right through New Delhi.
Putin's war?
I mean Modi's war.
Let me ask
because the road to peace runs in part through New Delhi.
Yeah, this is Modi's war. Richard, your take.
Yes, well, Mr. Navarro is an economist, and I am an economist, and Michael is an economist. At that point, we part company. When this man talks, I have a vision in my mind that is captured by the phrase, not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Anybody who trades with Russia is in some way making money off making that trade, because that's why the trade happens. It's profitable for the two sides to get together. That's what trading is about. Russia trades, I would guess, with at least 100 countries in the world, one of which is India. Okay, Mr. Navarro has decided that if you trade with Russia and you make money for Russia as part of the trade, well, therefore, you're killing Ukrainians. Okay, on that grounds, there should be an endless war of everybody against everybody, because Mr. Putin would be able to say exactly the same thing about the United States and everybody who trades with the United States. You are providing profits for the United States, which are taxed and used by the government to kill Russians in Ukraine. So, therefore, I am going to punish you. This way of reasoning is so stupid that it takes your breath away. Not that he says it, this is old, silly junk, but that a man in his position says it with all the clarity and enthusiasm that this poor fellow can drag out of his soul tells you only about him, not about anything else. If the Indians permitted the Americans to do this, right, they would be inviting every politician in the world, not just Americans, to use this kind of an argument to force concessions out of India. That's why we don't do that in general in the world. We just don't. That's why no other country is throwing tariffs at everybody, let alone using it to justify your position in a war. The war in Ukraine runs through Washington, D.C., which made the decision to push NATO to the frontier of Russia. Everybody who isn't silly knows that. If you want to, you can then use that as an argument to stop trading with the United States. But nobody's doing that. Only Mr. Navarro and the Mr. Trump who hires a Mr. Navarro and thereby joins him in the same drawer. This is extraordinary desperation. This is nonsensical junk. But it will have, and it is having, enormous consequences. India, is an economy that wants to grow in the way that the Chinese have. And that's a big job. They're a poor country. They're a very large country, larger than China now. They have a lot of hard work ahead. They don't need these obstacles. On the other hand, they have to have a longer view. And that's why Mr. Modi is in China now, or will get there in the next few hours if he's not already there. He's there because they're going to be figuring out, I'm paraphrasing Michael here, they're going to be figuring out how do you get around what has become a rogue state. If you watch and listen to Mr. Navarro, anybody who does business with Russia is indirectly aiding the Ukraine war. Well, then anybody who does business with anybody who does business with Russia is equally culpable. Come on. On that basis, every country punishes every other. And that's maybe where we're going. Maybe the rest of the world will simply now erect its own tariff barriers. The Indians will decide, okay, they have to write off the American economy. The richest or one of the richest economies in the world will now be cut off from the rest of the world. We have said on this program, and I'm going to say it again, after World War II, the name the United States applied to its policy toward the Soviet Union was, quote unquote, containment. George Kennan came up with that and became famous as the architect in the State Department, for the State Department, of containment. That was a simple word, isolate the Soviet Union so it could not infect the rest of the world. Here's the irony. The United States, by punishing the whole world, one after another, Canada, Mexico, India, and on and on and on, is isolating itself. It is performing self-containment, because that will be a major strategic objective of many, many parts of the rest of the world.
Well, it's true that Richard and I are both economists, but the economics discipline no longer calls itself political economy,
Right.
as it does in the 19th century. Richard and I are both political economists, but that's not what the discipline is, and that's not how the American foreign policy, economic policy is conducted. They've left out the political aspect, and that's exactly the dimension on which India has responded to the United States position. Modi gave a very explicit speech saying that India is acting within its sovereign rights, and America's threats to punish India with the 50% import tariffs is an attack on India's sovereignty, which it's its right to trade with whomever it wants. And the result is that for a number of results, the newspapers have said that President Trump has tried to call Modi on 4 different occasions. Modi has refused to pick up the phone and accept the call. And the reason's obvious. He knows that Trump is going to make a demand of his. He knows that his response will be, we cannot agree to that. We've already given the explanation. We are sovereign countries. We can't agree to that. A few days ago, India's foreign minister did something that I don't think other foreign ministers, certainly not in Europe or even Russia or China, have said explicitly. They've attacked President Trump personally for his policies, not just saying some countries want this or the United States wants this, just President Trump itself. There's a very personal antagonism now, and you can see the tension that's occurring within India. The United States wants India to be a market for its food exports. The single leading guiding light of American foreign policy since 1945 is to make other countries dependent on its grain exports, dependent on its food, to weaponize food. That is the core of World Bank loan policy, the core of U.S. backing of dictatorships, from overthrowing the Guatemalan government to imposing dictators all over Latin America, to prevent land reform, to prevent replacing plantation agriculture with growing their own food. The whole fight of India is saying we're not going to let America weaponize our food needs by bankrupting our farmers, having ourselves voted out of office ignominiously by selling out the farmers to make Mr. Trump happy by helping him rescue the faltering American agriculture. So the America's made a demand that cannot possibly be met, and that is of all things, that's what's been accelerating the Modi's abrupt 180-degree shift with China, saying, well, a few decades ago, even a few years ago, we had a military problem on the border with China. This is marginal. This is trivial compared to the big realignment in trade relations between us and China. This is just as Trump has performed the act of peace by driving Russia and China together for the next generation. Trump has now driven India together with China and Russia. India was the weakest link of the BRICS because so much of the Indian billionaires have ties to the United States. India has been so tied with Silicon Valley and all of the Indian computer programmers and designers in the United States, that while the billionaires in India are very pro-US because that's where their money was, the Indian population is very nationalistic. That's Modi's party. It's a nationalistic party. And so you can see that by neglecting this political reality, the United States has, as usual, done exactly the opposite of the intended effect that Trump announced.
Let me just spin out. I understand this is speculation, but it's the kind of speculation that throws a light on something you ought to think about. Suppose you follow the logic of what Michael just said. Then here is the deal that may be on the table in Beijing as we speak. The Chinese, who are at the forefront of artificial intelligence and everything having to do with computer, robot, and everything else. The Indians, who make up an inordinate portion of what the American Silicon Valley is all about. And they decide, we together don't need the United States. The Indians can come to Beijing, and we will have half of Silicon Valley in a suburb of Beijing and the other half of Silicon Valley in a suburb of New Delhi. And that's where all of the breakthroughs in high tech will be coming from in the years ahead. The United States, let me remind everyone, 4.5% of the world's people. India, China, Russia, nearly half of the world's people. with the BRICS, more than half of the world's people. In the end, the mouse will not overcome the elephant.
Richard, you put your finger on the key role of information technology and computers. It's not simply a rival. It's that there are two different computer systems. There's the American AI computer system, and there's the Chinese system. And the Americans, as we talked about last week, I think the whole ending part of our discussion was America is trying to monopolize the control over the system architecture of what artificial intelligence and computer chips are going to be, and hoping that they can use this monopoly to weaponize it and turn it into foreign dependency on American monopolists for their computer design. If India switches, as you've suggested, and seems logical to me, to join China and Russia, this is a critical mass blocking the rest of the world picking up America's computer technology, based as it still is, I think, on COBOL, which I had to use back in the 60 years ago, and all the sort of technology that's fallen behind. It ends America's ability to weaponize computerization and social media platforms and computer chip manufacturing, the whole array of monopolies that America thought would be its weapon to use alongside the control of the world's oil trade and its food trade. So this is what Trump has done by trying to, by his attack on India, saying, here's how much we can hurt you if you don't become a subordinate financial and military colony of ours.
But think of it also, the same point in reverse. Why would Trump jeopardize the position of the United States, thinking for a moment about what it might mean if India and China, the two, arguably two of the three leading cloud computing entities, you would have to be desperate to risk that. Why would you go after Indian exports? Remember, he's not even including pharmaceuticals, because he carved out, they have an exemption. They don't have to pay the 50% because they produce the feedstock and the basis for America's pharmaceutical industry. So you're only talking about 50% of what's left. Why would he risk bringing those two giants of the future technology into a reason to get? You must be you're either very stupid or you're very desperate, or maybe a combination.
You got it.